Today we will talk about TestNG annotations. So I have listed some of the TestNG annotation here, and within TestNG annotation we have some of the options which is also listed over here. So we'll talk about these annotations one by one and their options. Go to Eclipse. Here I have already written a program just to reduce the video time, and we have the annotation called data provider factory group annotation parameter testng. Within testng we will talk about sequence of annotations such as before class before suite before method, this kind of annotations. So first we'll talk about options of these annotations, which all options we can use during putting these annotations. So first one is always run. As its name indicate, if we put this option, uh, if we put this option, that particular method will always run. So we have written one of the program over here where we mention the group name A and B. For test 2 we mention as a group B. Now let me remove this from here. We'll run this and we'll see the result. And in group option, okay, we do have this in XML file. We mentioned that whichever method has whichever method has a group name as B, it will execute only those methods. So as per the XML file, it should run only test.2, sorry, test2 method. Let me execute this one and we'll see the result. So here, if you see the result, it's showing as a test2. So it executed only one method, which is test2, because it has a group name as a B. Now what we will do, we'll mention always run in the before class. Always run is equal to true. Now we'll run this program again and we'll see the result. We'll run this. Okay. So first it always run test. This particular method is run and then later on test 2. So before method don't have the group name as B, but we mention it as always run is equal to true. So because of that reason this method is executed first, right? So this is the important of this option. Now second one is depend on groups. Let's discuss about this method. So to test one we mention we use option as a depend on groups A, right? So here we have test 2 group name as A and test 3 group name as B. So what we are saying that uh, test 1 is depend on test 2. So this test 1 method only execute it will not execute before test 2 method. So it always execute after this one. So let me execute this and we'll see the result. As per the sequence, test 1, test 2, test 2. Where is the test 1? Let me execute this again from here. Run test ng. Okay, I think now we got the proper result. So it executed test 2 first, then test 3, and then test 1. As this test 1 is depend on test 2, it executed at last, means after test 2 only. Ideally, as per the sequence, test 2 should run at the first stage. First method execution method should be test 1. But as we mentioned, depend on group AA, so it will run after test 2. Now we will talk about depend on methods. It's same as a depend on groups. So as for this method, it depend upon the test method instead of the group. It depend upon the method name. So here we mentioned test 2, test 3 and test 1. So within test 1 we mention depend on methods test 2. So this test 1 method is depend upon test 2 method. So this test 1 will execute after test 2 only. So let me run this program. You will see the same result for this as well. Now you see here. So as for the sequence, if if you remove this and you will execute this, test 1 should run first, then test 2, then test 3. But as you mentioned, depend on method test 2. Because of that reason, test 2 is executed first and then test 1. So we'll next we'll talk about description. Okay, description. If we put the description, some string into description, it will just use for printing. Uh, Let me show you. It will just print that message on console. See here, this is test one. So whatever we mention in the description, after executing that method, you can see the description in the control. Okay, next option is enable. It's enable as its name indicate. If we mark enable as a false, it will not execute those method. And if we mark enable as a true, it will execute that particular method. Let me make it false, and we'll see the result. Run as TestNG. So here you can see it's execute only one method. It doesn't execute test 2 because we mark this enable as a false. Now we'll make it as a true. Now we'll run this program and see the result. Here we executed. Now you can see the result. It executed test 2 and then test 3, right? Because we marked this as a true. Now move to the next option, which is called grouping uh, groups. Okay, so in groups, as I think we already seen that how these groups run. So we can put the this group within the method within the annotation, and we can create number of groups, and from XML file we can execute the group whichever we want. So in XML, here I have written a XML code where we are saying that execute only group which has q. So here we mention p and q. So not this one, this p method. So it will execute only the group which has a p. So let me execute this one. I will show you the result. Executed. So it will execute only one method. Where is this? Let me execute again. So it will execute only one method, but it executing test 3 and test 2. Okay, ideally we should run it from XML, not from here. Just a minute. Okay, so it's executed only one method, which is test 2, because test 2 has a group name as a B. Where is test 2? This one, which has a group name as a P. Sorry. So it executed only one method. If you mark this as a P And if you run this program again, let me do this. Now it will execute both the methods. Let's see the result. See, here executed both the results, both the methods, right? Now we'll talk about invocation count. So it will, it will execute a method that number of time. If we mention the invocation count as a three, it will execute the method three time. So let me, okay, here, let me execute this and let me show you. The single method will be executed three times. See, test one, test one, test one. Now if we make this count as a five, save. Now we'll run this. So it execute this method five times. So invocation method is used to invoke the method number of time. Now the last one is priority. Priority. We using this option, we can prioritize our test cases. So zero would be the first priority. So as per the test method name, the sequence is test one, test two, and then test three. But as we mentioned, the priority test three as a zero, so it should execute test three first, and then test one and test two. Let me execute this one first. See the result. So test three is executed first, then test one, then test two. Because we mark this priority is equal as zero means it should execute the at a first stage, and then it will go for the other methods. So this is all about the options of the annotation. Now we'll talk about actual annotations. For that we already have the programs here. Here we do have the programs. So we'll talk about these annotations now. So let's talk about this annotation. First, we'll talk about TestNG annotation. So, in TestNG annotation, we'll talk about the sequence of annotations. Let me show you. Here we have mentioned this annotation such as before suit, before class, before method, before test, test, and then in the same way after test, after method, after class, after suit. So before suit, definitely it will run when we start this execution. Then before class, it will run before class as its name indicate. Before method, so these are the methods. These are two methods. So this particular method, before method will run each time after each method. So it will execute twice because we have two methods, right? And before test, so before test means whatever the test annotation we have before this all test annotation, this suit will run. So the sequence would be before suit, then before test, then before class, and then before method. So it will run in that way. We have the outcome over here. So let me execute this again and we'll see the outcome again. Test ng annotations. Let's check the result. So it's before suit first, then before test, then before class, then before method. Then we have this test method means this method, right? And then after method, definitely it will execute that one. Then again before method, because this method execute each time based on the methods available in the class. So it executed again, then test one, then after test, then after class, after test, and then after suit, right? So this is the sequence of these annotations. Now Sorry. Now let's talk about parameter annotation. In parameter annotation, we can pass the parameter any value that we have to pass to the program. So here, if you see, we are passing browser and its version. Now we have an XML file where we are passing these values. Uh, we have created this XML. So parameter name as a browser. So this name should match with your with parameter the key which you have given in the parameter annotation and the version. So we'll see browser is equal to Chrome, the value should be Chrome, and the version is equal to the value should be V80. So if you are executing this, it will pass these values to this parameter, and then it, it will pass this value to this variables, and it will print accordingly. So let's see the result. Here we are. Sorry. So here we are executing this one. Okay. Okay. Now it has printed browser name as a Chrome, and the version number is V80. The same thing we can run from goal as well. Let me check if we have the file name given in pom.xml or not. In pom.xml, we are not mentioned the name. Okay. Okay. So I think this talk about this parameter annotation, that how we can pass the value into the parameter annotation, right? The another annotation is group annotation. In the group annotation, we have mentioned the group name. See here, we have mentioned the group name to each test annotations, right? So if we're executing this, suppose if you want to execute B or A, then suppose if you have to execute B, then in this case in before group you have to mention it as a B, so it will execute only this method. If you mention the group name as a, then it will execute this two method, right? So before groupings, whatever the group name we mention in the before group, it will execute only those methods. Let me run this and see the result. TestNG. Okay, so ideally it should run this test3 method. Let's see. Uh, test3, test1, test2, test3. It executed all. Test1, test2, test3. Okay, why is it so? Let me rerun. Let me save this first. This before group will execute before the group name which is mentioned. So before this method, it will execute before this particular before group method, right? So here if you see the sequence, it executed group A and B, group A, sorry, A and B group, then A group, and then before group, and then it executed B group, right? So it executed this, and before executing this, it executed this particular method, right? So if you mention this as A and execute, okay, let me see the result. Okay, before group executed first because it is before A group, right? Now the result has changed. So before group is used if you want to run a certain method before any group, then accordingly you can use this annotation. Now we'll talk about data provider annotations. So data provider and annotation is used when you have to pass multiple values to your method, such as here we have used data provider and the name is equal to browser name. So if you want to pass multiple browser names, so you can use this data provider. Now we have created array over here and returning browser name as a Chrome and Firefox. This data provider name will be used by the your method, right? So if it is using this name, then it will print, this method will print Chrome and Firefox. Let me execute this method. Test engine annotation. See here, it has executed and printed Chrome and Firefox. So data provider is generally used to provide the data to your program. We can take the data from Excel sheet and provide it to data provider. Then we can provide it to our test method. But this is the simple program where we are just passing two values to you can say this is variable name. We are just passing these two values to browser name. Now we'll talk about factory annotation. Factory annotation is used whenever you want to execute the annotation from two different classes. Then in that case you can use this factory annotation. So here we are executing, in this example we are executing data provider data provider annotation class and this testng class. So in testng class we have two methods, I guess. Yes, test one and test two. Let me mark. Let me name is that as class one. Class one, and this has a class one. Class. mm, okay, class one and class one. And in group annotation. Oh, sorry, data provider. We have used the data provider, right? Okay. So now let's run this program. Okay. Now see the outcome. It has executed these four methods, right? Class 1 and class 2 from the test engine annotation method, and this Chrome and Firefox from the uh, data provider annotation, and this particular sequence from your test annotation. So it executed two different classes which have the annotations. So this factory annotation is used for executing the the class, different class which has the annotation over there. So this is all about test engine annotations. Thank you.